So good morning from this glorious hilltop. I'm hiking down actually, so if I stumble, bear with me. But that's overlooking Santa Fe, New Mexico. Out there, it's hard to tell, but that is actually Santa Fe out there. You can maybe see some glistening out there in the distance. Anyway, my name is Tammy Davis, and I practice aromatology and phytotherapy. I have a background in pharmacology, and my specialty is, I'm gonna have to hold it with two hands. My specialty is, well, it's just holistic health. That's what I focus on, but I actually bring in a different level of health, and that has everything to do with the way we look at it. I do more than symptom addressing. I look at what's actually going on in the body, and so for that reason, I study drug development, or rather I follow and study plant constituents and in relation to drug development and their effect on the human genome. Because even though they may not be turning all of these things into medications, they are looking to do so, and they're also trying to understand how these plants are helping in the way of health. So that said, that's actually how I apply the use of essential oils, and I pair it with nutrition, because nutrition is the key. Quality nutrition is the key, relieving the stress response in the body, because the stress response is actually a protection mechanism, also known as survival mode. And so I pair that with the use of essential oils, and when I formulate essential oil blends, I'm actually focusing on the constituents and the synergistic effect of combined constituents and oils, and the way that they will ultimately impact the system. Now, that said, special consideration needs to be given to those people who are taking medications, because you would have to use them differently. The whole point to my premise is stability, regardless if you're taking medications or not. Stability is the key to health and wellness. And it is possible to accomplish that, but we have to begin to look at the why we're having health issues and why we're experiencing, why we can't eat gluten, okay, why we have high cholesterol. And this is the point to this. I'm actually working on a post right now on my website regarding cholesterol, but I wanted to share a few points here, because we're constantly being told not to eat junk food, right? We're constantly hearing that processed food is bad for us, but I don't know about you, but sometimes understanding why that is, because if we like something and something tastes good, it's really kind of hard to wrap our heads around, I'm not supposed to be eating this because this is bad for me. That kind of stimulates the kid in us that goes, well, wait a minute, if nobody's watching, I can get away with one, right? We can justify that. And then it turns into another, and then it turns into another. And I'm going to share some information also here in the description box below regarding something that I ran across when I was actually pulling up some information for somebody regarding Gatorade. So if you're new to my channel, welcome. Let me back up and say that. Thank you very much for hanging out with me on my morning hike. I decided sometimes it's fun to do these because, well, just sitting there looking at someone talk at you is a little rough and boring. So I thought, well, I'd give you something to look at, something to listen to if you wanted to turn away and go off and do other things. So anyway, in this case, I have a young man who drinks Gatorade because he works tirelessly. I mean, he just works hard, landscaping business, and what he does is he drinks gallons of Gatorade. Now, I'm not putting down Gatorade, okay, but I'm using this as an example because it's extremely important. And and his mother was saying to me, "You mean Gatorade's good for you?" I said, "Well, you know, it does actually help to rehydrate you." But I've introduced her to the Vega Hydrator, which is a powder, and that link is in the box below, because it does compare significantly. And I personally feel like at this point in the environment that we have, including extra electrolytes in our day from time to time is a really good idea, because it does help to replenish the trace minerals that are absolutely necessary for nerve function, nerve signaling, as well as fluid regulation and so forth. But at any rate, so this Gatorade has an ingredient called monophosphate. Wait a minute. I think it's monopotassium. It's monopotassium phosphate. That's what it is. It's monopotassium phosphate. And like I said, there's a link in the box below to a document that I produced that actually states that this particular ingredient it's a stabilizer. It's a buffering agent, more importantly. It's a buffering agent for the drinks. And it is been approved by the FDA, of all things, because they claim that it's good for the heart. But yet, this monopotassium phosphate is also used in fertilizer. And the reason it's used in fertilizer is because it actually helps reduce the release of ammonia when combined with urea. And so it prevents the release of ammonia, which in some respects makes sense, because free-floating ammonia is toxic to the body. But here's the thing, you guys. The human body actually produces ammonia. And my concern is, and I mean, I can't find any information. I imagine if I dug around, I probably could further. But initial thoughts on this have not been verified. But I will say my concern for this is that the human body produces ammonia. Ammonia is used to produce, is converted into urea for elimination. But just because it's converted to urea doesn't mean that we still don't have ammonia in the body. So what is this monopotassium phosphate actually doing in the human body? So at any rate, like I said, I turned him on to this Vega Hydrator because it is one that I use. I went from having a condition where I didn't perspire. I mean, I should say I didn't sweat, which was very frightening when it would get really hot, because I would feel like I was going to pass out. And within a couple of days of including this in my lifestyle, it completely changed that for me. That combined with the oils has made a huge difference on my autonomic nervous system and the way I react to the environment. Now, the significance of all of this is the fact that these chemical additives, Gatorade tastes good, man. We like it, and it does its job. So why limit the amount that you drink? Why reduce it to maybe one once in a while instead of one all the time, you know? Because the thing is, I want to point out, it's not necessary to make extraordinary changes very, very fast, because it's going to be harder to train yourself for these new habits. So doing this step by step, you know, gradually, is probably your best bet. Eventually, you might actually find yourself no longer eating or drinking these things that aren't necessarily good for us or potentially harmful to the body. You just might find yourself kind of easing your way out of them. But just to go, for lack of a better term, cold turkey, is kind of foolish. So that said, the point that all of this makes is, by reducing the amount of processed foods or drinks that contain these kinds of additives, is important, because these additives, the body doesn't know what to do with it. They're not naturally occurring. And that's maybe a hard thing for us to wrap our heads around. I mean, a chemical is a chemical. I used the word chemical yesterday with my son. I was talking about the constituents in an essential oil, and he asked me what constituents were, and I said they're chemicals. They're chemicals. They are the chemicals that make up the oil. And he says, but they're real, natural, right? And I said, of course they are. But a chemical is a chemical. That's how nature communicates. And when it is naturally occurring, not to sound airy-fairy or kind of woo-woo-y, but there is a vibration. There's an energy to them because they're whole. They haven't been cut. They haven't been made in a lab from inorganic matter or inorganic compounds, which is what's happening with a lot of our plant constituents. Even the ones in essential oils are currently being replicated for further use, and you can find patents for these. And when they're patenting them, that means they're making them in a lab. And how they make them, we are not privy to that information, but I can tell you it's in a lab. And that tells you right there that it's not 100% from nature. And if they're having to produce, say, something like limonene, they're not just removing it from an oil and discarding it, they're recreating the molecule. And I can understand why, because the quality can be controlled and so forth, but that doesn't make it better for us. And when you get limonene in an essential oil combined with the other constituents from that same plant and other plants, you're going to have a different response by the body than you would if you were just to use limonene on its own. And limonene does have a lot of benefits. So getting it in your essential oils is your better bet. But that said, when we get these things from, that are reproduced, the body responds to them differently. And the reason why is because it's been singled out, and for that matter, it's not even naturally occurring. I mean, yeah, the body can potentially break it down into potassium and phosphate, but it's not doing that. It's not an actual, I should say, phosphorus. The combination the purpose of it is, like I said, is a buffering agent. And buffering means that it's trying to stabilize it. So that ends up being stressful to the body because it's trying to control it. That's the easiest way I know how to explain this. I mean, I can trying to get into all sorts of scientific explanations and make it sound really, really technical. But the fact is that health is a lot more simple than we're allowing ourselves to believe. And we really need to kind of back out of the complexity and just realize that it's a mixed message, because, I mean, technically, this particular ingredient is combined with other artificial ingredients, and so therefore the body doesn't know what to do with it. It's just, there's not an energy to it that communicates in a positive way, because again, nature communicates via chemicals. And if it gets an artificial chemical or man-made chemical, it's going to respond differently than what it does to a natural one. I'm trying to think of a good example of that. Well, I mean, bacteria and viruses are good examples. We keep hearing about these aggressive bugs, but these are life forms. These are organisms that are designed to thrive. They're designed to survive, more importantly. So what ends up happening is they become more resilient. They adapt. That's how they become resilient. They adapt to the technology, to the chemicals that we're putting in front of them, and therefore no longer affected by them. So this is what the human body is doing. Now, I'm not saying you might say that it's being affected. Well, we have to take into consideration our body as an organism is far more complex than a bacteria organism. So there's a lot more involved to the things that are triggered. And to say that it's not working in our favor is a judgment, because we really can't predict how this is going to go. We don't know what our body is really doing. We can only speculate. So technically, the body is working. It's just responding to the chemicals coming into it and it's adapting accordingly. Just because we don't like the results does not mean it's dysfunctional. So that's why I say the stress response is a protection mechanism. It's actually, we are wired to protect ourselves from things that are potentially harmful. And we're having a harder time because there's more and more chemicals. Again, if you're new to my channel, there's 45 million chemicals currently being consumed around the planet. We are constantly being inundated with man-made chemicals. Therefore, the body is in constant motion of trying to adapt for the sake of protection. This is the reason why bacteria and viruses can lay down these biofilms for protection. It's essentially what we're doing. And so when the body is in protection mode, it alters, it does a number of things. And the first one is it alters the way it breaks down its foods. So the digestive system becomes compromised. And ongoing, the immune system appears to be unstable because it's really working. So this is the reason why I come back to stability and why I focus heavily on digestion, from the mouth to the cell and everything in between. And this is why processed foods are triggering our systems. Well, this is the reason for reducing the amount of packaged and processed foods, because they contain these additives that actually stimulate the stress response. Because if the body has to have a level of ammonia controlled, it's going to find another way. It's going to make the changes necessary. So I've talked about this before. We're basically at war with our own body. And it's pretty sad that when you make a drink and you have to add chemicals to it to stabilize it. I mean, I just find that odd. It's hard for me to wrap my head around. But again, this isn't about whether Gatorade is good for you or not, because it does do its job. But the fact is the body cannot be controlled. For as much as we think we can control it, it will not be controlled. Therefore, we are essentially at war with it. And the more we fill it with chemicals that are a potential threat, the more we, I don't know where my dog went, the more we are in survival mode, and the greater risk our lives, because our health will continue to what looks like decline, because we're not aware that our body's not breaking the foods down that it needs. Then we are potentially hungrier and hungrier, because it's not getting the carbs and the proteins and the fats necessary for hormonal production and tissue development and enzyme production for cellular function and so forth. So this is the reason for the whole post on cholesterol, because it does actually come down to digestion and the things that we're not being told. But if we can actually help to stabilize the system, and again, the oils make a difference because they are signaling molecules much like our own hormones. And if we can work with it and help it to stabilize and pair it with foods that help it to perform optimally, we're now ahead of the game. Meaning we actually have a handle on being well. This is a lifestyle that I highly recommend for everyone, not just the hiking, but oils and whole food nutrition, not superfood. Superfoods are good if you're older, because they do have phytonutrients and sterols that are necessary for adult health, because, well, truthfully, our body has been under attack by the environment our entire lives, and so it takes a little bit more oomph to gear it back up again. But for children, the results of this kind of lifestyle are truthfully miraculous. There's Theo. Come on, bud. I think my boy wants some water. He loves his morning hikes. So, yeah, we give our children a chance to have a more functional future. You know, I'm not, you know, we have all of these, again, it's not about not enjoying what you like, but one thing my dad used to say was everything in moderation. Well, at this point, I think we need to dial down the moderation and allow ourselves to enjoy some things from time to time. And the more you intentionally use essential oils, intentionally. I don't mean like go to the cabinet and pick out an oil and go, okay, today I'm going to use lavender because I want to be relaxed. I'm not talking about that. First and foremost, in this day and age, you shouldn't be using lavender. Talk to me about that one. But what I'm referring to when I say intentionally using oils, I'm talking about selecting those that are actually going to help stabilize your system, not provide just immediate symptom relief. Remember how I started this whole thing off? Because again, when we look at such things as why is my cholesterol high, it comes to your digestion. It comes down to the way your body is or isn't using fat. And for that matter, producing vitamin D. For more on that, you want to take a look at that post. But as far as, you know, gluten, why can't I eat gluten? I was sitting there talking to my son's new girl the other night, and she, you know, she says that she can't eat gluten, but she just feels a whole lot better without it. Well, I know many people that way. But not eating gluten is treating a symptom. The symptom is what? Why is that we can't have gluten? Well, it actually tells me a big thing. If you can't eat gluten and you feel better without it, that tells me your autonomic nervous system is on high alert. The angiotensin II receptor has been activated, and it's allowing angiotensin to flow, and that is going to cause your blood pressure to go up eventually, if it isn't already. But you can, of course, reduce the stress, right, by not taking in gluten. So it's has an immediate benefit, but long term, that's where I go with all of this. I mean, and that's what I always ask people, what are your long-term desires? Because if it's just symptom relief, you can get that anywhere. But if what you really want is to reclaim your life and be able to enjoy things that have gluten, to be able to occasionally enjoy the junk food, you know what I'm saying? Another one, when I was talking to somebody about weight, because I want to finish up with this one. This was an important one. And, you know, they were going on and on and on about people, you know, obesity and heaviness. And, you know, it's insulting to me. I just don't like it when I hear people accuse others of, you know, for the way their body looks. You know, accusing them of being lazy and so forth, and indulgent. I just want to say this. Adipose tissue, which is fat tissue, is the largest endocrine organ. So it's part of the hormonal system. And this is significant. So based on everything I just said, and yes, you could say that some people, I can't say all, but there are people who are struggling with their weight, obesity, if you will. However, I don't even like to use that word. But fat loss, they're trying to lose fat and weight. But they do, you know, people look at it and go, well, yeah, they eat a lot of junk food. But here's the thing. Remember, I'll let him do his business. We had rain. But remember, the thing is, when we're eating these junk foods, and we are not just junk food, it's just the environment. I mean, because fat tissue is used for a number of reasons. First one is energy. Second one is to store toxins. And depending on the individual, it will, you know, it'll go either way, but it is a hormonal, it leads to a hormonal imbalance because the body is stressed. And the more the body is stressed, the more it's hungrier it feels, the greater the appetite. Now, this isn't an excuse to eat more. If that's what you choose to do, that's your prerogative. So I'm not condoning, you know, gluttony. What I am saying, though, I'm trying to offer understanding that, you know, being overweight is a hormonal imbalance, just as it's being underweight. Comes down to hormonal disruption. And the hunger that and the appetite that's experienced has more to do with the cells needing energy and literally being hungry. This is what happens when you take medication. So being able to recognize that and stop blaming and judging body size on derogatory comments or thoughts and beliefs, and actually realizing that there's more to this, and that yeah, it is the body being hungry. It is a lack of nutrition at the cell level. So anyway, just in case you ever come to Madrid, that's what we require. Anyway, I just wanted to offer that piece of information because the bottom line to any health condition, I mean, I just got a new case for myotonic dystrophy. It all comes back to the way the hormonal system is disrupted due to the stress response. And what can we do to improve its reaction to the environment? And one of those ways is watching what we ingest, because those additives are definitely putting our body on high alert. But don't just jump into it, you know, and eliminate everything altogether, because that's going to throw you, believe it or not, into a relapse, because in many ways those chemicals are addictive. They are making the body dependent. You guys got to take a look at his feet. Can you see his feet? Maybe you can now. You're black from walking through that puddle. Anyway, appreciate you guys watching. Let me know if you have any questions. Tammy at synergessence.com. Synergessence.com is the website. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter at TammyDavis8 on both. You guys have a blessed day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye now.